Hope everybody's doing well. As I was just telling some of my early bird guests earlier today, it's been a interesting morning the last couple of mornings because we've been having some maintenance work done here at the apartment complex that I live in and all in that space. So definitely having the folks do the scraping of the paint as they were painting the steps and the rails and getting all of that work done. So it's definitely some fun conversations going on in that space as they were getting set and getting prepared for doing some spring cleaning. As a matter of fact, yours truly needs to do some spring cleaning within the apartment as well. So that's actually on my list of things to get done at some point or another, even though it's one of the things that we'll probably talk about during this show, which is procrastination can get in the way because I can be one of the world's worst procrastinators in that sense. But like I was saying to one of the guests, it was interesting when I stepped outside and the one of the painters had their family with them. So they were actually having a full picnic. They had brought, of course, the paint to get the job done, but they had their young one with them as well. Looked like they might have been either very early school age, like in elementary school, or maybe even not quite in the school grades. But she was roaming around and definitely enjoying working and hanging out with her dad as he did the painting and all in that space. But it's interesting when you step outside and you see a whole picnic area going on as well. So they were having their own little picnic and all in that space. And ironically, one of my first guests apparently was having construction work as well. So we're going to find out how that all managed to happen because mine was in Durham, North Carolina, and I have to figure out where Jill is at. So I'm going to bring in Jill, and I've got some other amazing guests as well. But then we'll bring in Jill first. She was the first one to the party and all in that space. So always good to see people that are first to the party. And I know that part of what Jill talks about is something that we also are very guilty of. And we were talking about it on the show earlier today, which is this notion of living paycheck to paycheck. Because every time you turn around, you're trying to borrow some money from somebody or you're trying to get some money going because you got that lovely paycheck. And I used to have this joke, Jill, that I was just going to take the bill collectors with me because there's no reason for them to like have to go through either online or everything else. They're going to get my money anyway, so I might as well just take them with me to the bank and just hand it to them and all of that space. I thought it would be a great idea. But then the other great idea I had is I do have some of those debit cards. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at about 3 or 4 of them. And I used to jokingly say that whenever I put the debit card in the machine, I swore up and down that the debit card was laughing at me because the debit card was going like, you actually think that there is money in here. Why do you think there's money in here if you didn't put any money in here? So I'm just convinced that the credit cards were or the debit cards were laughing at me in that space. But you try to get these teenagers and others to not make the mistakes that we've made because I do know that those college kids are oftentimes, and I do live literally right around the corner from Duke University, that they are oftentimes being constantly courted for those credit cards, and they get them and then they max them out, and then they wind up being broke and also paying their loans. But if you'll share a little bit about your story of what you've got going on and even some of those mistakes that you made.
Well, I've made all those mistakes. I'm the one who, in my early 20s, maxed out 27 credit cards. So I've been in debt. I've learned how to get out of it. I've made all the other mistakes. And I think it's great that your debit cards laugh with you. Money's fun. You have to have fun with it. You have to take it seriously, but not to the point of being overrunning your life, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with
Um,
you. You can't have it overrun your life, not at all.
you can't. And it's never too late to learn something to improve on what you have. I mean, we've all had times when we live paycheck to paycheck. There's an unexpected expense. You were mentioning construction at your place. It's going on here. Um, you know, whenever, whether it be whatever stage of life, there's always somebody has their hand out to you saying, I need money for, you know, and it's up to you to figure out, do I do it? Is this the best way to do it? Do I have the money to do it now? You know,
Yeah, that
those
makes a
are
lot of
hard
sense.
questions.
How did you get out of the credit debit situation? Because I know that my credit report is not that great, and I do know that I have gone and taken a look at it. I want to say at one point it was like even one of those non-existent credit reports or something along those lines, which are very rare to have in all in that space. That'll tell you how bad it was and all in that sense. But how do you get to a bad credit and make it a better credit?
Well, the biggest factor in the FICO credit score is on time payments.
Right.
So by starting to make your payments on time, and if you're living paycheck to paycheck, an on time payment is the minimum due. You want to pay more, but at least get that minimum to them by the due date. That's 35% of your credit score. And
Okay.
that's looking at the past 2 years. So it does take some time, but you can improve it tremendously, you know.
Wow.
And older stuff, while it still stays with you for 7 years, sometimes 11, depending on what it is, the farther in your history it is, the less it counts.
Well, that's what I was going to ask because I know that one of the biggest things, and I think that that's part of what even our current president was dealing with and everything, has been the student loans. I mentioned the credit cards, and yes, college kids, and I am near two colleges, North Carolina Central University and Duke that I mentioned earlier, but also around the corner from Durham Tech and UNC and North Carolina State and a bunch of other colleges, including Shaw and St. Augustine, not that far away. So I do know that there was that whole notion of getting kids into these credit cards, sometimes with celebrities' names on them and all that space. But there's also the money that they borrowed to go to school. And none of these schools
Mm-hmm.
are exactly cheap and everything. So that whole student loan thing, I think, is what has weighed on many folks' credit. I know that that's what weighed on mine and still to some degree continues to weigh on it. So how do we deal with that? And maybe the student loan idea is a great idea. I don't know, but I'm just wondering, how do
Well,
we deal with that?
most people are going to need student loans. In a perfect world, you're getting a degree in something that's going to pay you well so that you can pay them off.
Right.
I mean, you're not going to school to get a general studies degree to then work in a job that doesn't require a degree. But I would say you obviously want to go after as much free money as you can get. Apply for any scholarship. Don't think that a $500 scholarship, oh, it's not worth my time. That's $500 less than you're borrowing.
Right.
Do your FAFSA, get as much as you can do. Depending on your financial situation, there's nothing wrong with starting at a local college for your first year or two, you know, and then transferring out to your bigger Dukes or wherever you are in the country, but you can go to, I have family in North Carolina, but the other side. So,
Right.
like, they've gone to Appalachian State,
Mhm.
you know, but there are, that way. Do
Oh
as
yeah.
much as you can for as reasonable as you can.
Yeah, that
I
makes
mean, I
sense.
don't want you to go to the community college to be a doctor, but you can take your first year English, math, history there at an in state school at a reasonable price.
Yeah, you can definitely do that. The other thing I was curious about, and I definitely want to get into some of the other guests. Like I said, it's a fun dinner-like conversation. But well, the other thing I was curious about is, um, with all of this money that is being gotten, particularly by the credit card companies and the debit card companies, because every time I go to some of these convenience stores, that is very much what people are spending with. They're using these debit cards as well because the promise of the debit card is that they will give you some sort of return on the money that you are spending. Now it's oftentimes penny on the dollars or something like that, or the different rewards programs that they are also claiming that they are creating as well. And I don't know how effective they are, and I just wondered, in your book and in your talks, do you encourage people to deal with the debit cards, or do you actually try to push them away from those?
Depends on your situation. Nothing's ever an easy answer. I
Right.
mean, debit cards are great because you're spending your money. You
Right.
can't spend more than you have. Um, Depending on the location, sometimes it scares me because of identity theft and all the
Right.
people trying to get your information. You have a lot more protection using a credit card, but then you can overspend, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I can definitely see that being an issue with a number of folks in that space and all along those lines. And like I said, we just have a full house. It's a great dinner party. So I want to bring in some of the other folks and have them share some of their stories and their truth. And one of them is one that I've had before on, and she's actually dealt with some of the things around addiction and life in general. So I'm going to bring in the illustrious actress, Deborah Richards, and all in that space. So, Deborah, glad to have you back on and all in that way. How are you doing and everything? I know you've dealt with some things around addictive personalities and stuff in that nature. So you probably were relating to some of this conversation around finances because that can also
Well,
probably into what goes on.
yeah, firstly, thank you for having me here, and I'm doing great, thank you. And just one correction: I'm not an actress; I'm a film director.
Film director, right?
And yeah, so my last movie, "Move Me to Mountain," which recently came out on Amazon Prime, dealt with the subject matter of homelessness in Las Vegas.
Wow.
And in order to deal with the subject matter with dignity and authenticity, we did a lot of research with the Las Vegas Rescue Mission and Shine a Light Foundation. And so, yeah, we spent a lot of time in the tunnels under the city with these people, and also spent a lot of time hearing stories of people who have suffered massive economic loss. And because I think there's a misconception that homeless are all in Vegas, they're all either drunks or gamblers or something like that. But the reality is there are so many reasons why people become homeless, and just things like um, forest fires in California wipe out half a town overnight, and a lot of those people, they go and stay at a friend's, and then when they out welcome that, they stay in their car, and then when they can't keep up their job because they're staying in their car, they lose the car, and it's a slippery slope. And so I heard recently, actually talking about all this economic turmoil and personal finances. I heard recently that one third of America is just one financial disaster away from like just one medical bill or one parking ticket away from complete financial ruin. And how does that happen in the richest country in the world? How
Yeah,
does
that's what
that
I've been trying to figure out too. And like you just mentioned, and a lot of times when people think of Vegas, they think of people going there trying to get that quick fix, that quick win, that quick money, and everything in that space. But it does have a homeless problem. I know that there is a homeless problem in other parts of California, and even here in North Carolina, there are places that are tent cities and that are here in the area. So I'm oftentimes shocked, and I'm trying to figure out, like you, how that can even happen here in this society, in a
happen?
society that is so abundant and all in that space. But I'd love to hear both of y'all's ladies' thoughts around that because I do know that it is a vital issue and it does play to even some of the ways that we deal with our finances.
Well, I'll just jump in and say real quick. I think it's an affordable housing problem generally across America. There's so many socioeconomic problems. I mean, where to start pulling that all apart? But there's not enough people to consume all the products we've been pumping out globally for years, and now there's not enough people to consume all those products. So there's like a massive imbalance in the socioeconomic landscape of the future of America going forward over the next couple decades. And I'm just a film director. I don't know how many answers, but there's so many problems in this country. And I think social media has probably accelerated a lot of that. Excuse me, Jill, what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
I'd agree with you. I mean, social media and instant gratification, people want to keep up with the Joneses. And yes, it is scary. There are many, many people that are one bill away from, losing something, losing their car, losing their home. It's a tragedy. Um, and I hope to educate people so that they can learn to save or live below their means so there is that safety cushion
Yeah, I don't know how many
because we
people even
can't
have
always
that.
go back to mom and dad
Yeah,
and say,
no,
hey,
can't
I'm
always
in
do that.
trouble, you know.
So do you think this is a generational thing where people haven't, maybe younger generations haven't really had to put in the grit to tighten the belt or work that extra job or whatever it is? Is it generational, or is this just
I don't know if I'd agree with it's generational. I think it's always been there. It's now more in the media because everything's out there. I'm older, so I grew up where the local news was the local news. You didn't know what was going on in the other part of the country, and things weren't told to you about, national statistics as much. But yeah,
Yeah,
there are
definitely.
people I know that, were homeless or lost their home. People that I thought were very successful, people I knew, got an unexpected, as you said, medical bill or something, and that's a whole nother topic of not having affordable insurance to be able to afford that so that you don't have the big medical bills.
Yeah, that's
But
a whole
yeah,
other
people
conversation.
are one step from a disaster.
Oh yeah, no doubt about that. Definitely one step from a disaster. We've seen that quite a bit and everything. So I definitely love to have folks share a lot of their different stories as well. And entrepreneurship has been something that has been growing quite a bit as well during this time. And I did have I think Esther Lamb that was on it. I wanted her to share some of her thoughts about some of the things that she's been doing in that space, particularly with entrepreneurship and all along those lines. And also I've got Victoria McGooey, but I'm gonna bring on Esther first and then Victoria as well. So definitely Esther has been in the audio industry and is actually part of a family of legacy and all in that way. So Esther, how are you doing? How's everything going? And I know you've been listening some in the background and everything. And like I said, we've seen a lot of concerns about the economy, but we've also seen during this pandemic a growth in entrepreneurship. And I know that your family comes from a legacy of entrepreneurs. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about how this whole audio industry grew up and how you even came into that lane.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me amongst such great ladies. And I'm excited to be on. If you hear background noise, it's my kids. It's 11 by us. I'm in Israel. My father's buried here. So we came to commemorate the 1 year since his transition. I'll jump into your question. First, I wanted to mention what Jill, right? Jill was saying about like how the credit score and everything affects you. I mean, it's really crazy because like we're in the growth stage, even though I'm trying to put like blinders on, almost like be ignorant to what's happening in the world and keep telling God like, okay, I gotta do this because we're scaling right now, the family business. And yeah, the credit really it really jumps up and down. It was never like this though, Jill. I've had a credit card since I'm 14 years old. I've had American Express and had a good, credit history. But like I noticed that if like my company spending and it's all like we're really being tracked now. It's really crazy. Like, and if you're like at that 30% of using whatever your credit line is, your score just drops by like 100 points. It's really
It,
insane. You pay it off and then, but sometimes you need that. Like, what's the point of having a credit card? You need that little cushion. So I'm noticing that it wasn't like that 10, 15, 20 years ago. The
right, it wasn't. FICO has kind of ruled the industry, and yes, that's one of the bigger things. Not as big as the payment, but yeah, your usage, what percentage overall? Um, yeah, they want it under 30%, and
that
that makes up 30% of your score. So it's the second biggest factor.
factor, right? It's kind of
But
crazy.
there are times you need it, and
There are times you need it. So it's like, what's like, I don't know. It's almost like a catch-22 situation. But Mark, to answer your question, with our family business, my father started the company where we came to America as immigrants. We were refuseniks, coming from the former Soviet Union. I was 7 years old, and I guess you could say like like what the American dream is. Like it was like the oasis. And my father wasn't allowed to leave the former Soviet Union for 10 years. He was one of the top engineers then, even, and had around 500 people working under him. So he was their cash cow. They didn't want, he lived, it was under communists. So the government, used him as best as they could. And they didn't want him to leave because based on his audio designs, they sold overseas. When we came to this country, a series of different events led him to um, intern at a company. Then they wanted to make him partner, but they really tried to squeeze him, and he wasn't having it. So with 50 cents in his pocket, or what's the expression, a dollar in a dream, he opened up his own company in 1993, and I, grew up as a industry baby, you know, very privileged in that sense. Listening to really good music. My father took me to ballet. I did ballet myself, classic ballet for 12 years. And I went to like the symphony and, really understood what, acoustically speaking, what good sound is. Um, and I remember, thinking when I was like in my 20s, like, why couldn't, because at that time I was going through a very different stage in my life. I was very desensitized, and I was like channeling Nicole Richie and Paris Hilton. And I was like, why couldn't he be like in Hollywood? Because everyone, but thank God he wasn't, because that's not where I'd want to be. And I'm very blessed and grateful that he, did what he was doing. And really, we manufacture amplifiers, and really there's amplification in everything, right? In your TV, in your radio. But this is a very niche industry that I feel very, very passionate about. And it just happens to be that, as a woman entrepreneur, my stepmom and I took over running the business when my father became ill a few years ago. And with his passing, I realized that, it's something we always discussed. My father just loved, he did it for the love of sound. He loved humanity, he loved God. And he really saw himself as a vehicle, as a channel to elevate humanity through good sound, because that's really, most people have never really heard a high end audio system. When I say, oh, high end audio, they're like Bose. And I'm like, no, you know, but it's two channel audio. And really, the sound is so powerful. Most people that listen and haven't experienced, they really have like outer body, very emotional experience. People talk about different sensations, goosebumps and whatnot. And, I feel that, music in general to me is a universal language. It overrides everything, right? Religion, ethnicity, whatever it is, it connects us. And I've seen it firsthand. Sometimes where I used to go with him to the CES show every year, and he would tell me, this group, this guy doesn't like that guy. And I used to think it's such like nonsense. Why? Because this guy thinks he's left, and this guy's center, and this guy's right, about all these things that are kind of pre-programmed into us anyway, of why not to like somebody. And then all of a sudden they're all sitting in a room together and they play a Bob Dylan song. And all of a sudden people start like chatting and smiling, and they forget, and yeah, I feel, like I said, very blessed to now have the opportunity to scale the company. And again, I started saying, I put blinders on. I try not to listen to the news and all the negativity. It's not that I'm not aware of it. I just don't make that as a part of my reality. I talk more to God. He's in control. And we've seen a lot of miracles, and, in us positioning the company. We moved it to Miami. We moved from a 3,300 square foot space to an 8,000 square foot facility. And we opened up what I call an experiential center. So it's our like corporate headquarters, but it's also obviously our manufacturing, warehouse, production, but also a place where I could curate the narrative the way that I see fit. And not, not to say that I'm not going to rely on our dealer network, but it's a place to actually bring in dealers to really have them experience sound the way my father saw it, the perfect way, to experience sound. And we're in right next to Wynwood, if you're familiar with Miami at all. And it's a place called Little Haiti. It's
Mhm.
called Magic City Little Haiti, and it's being dubbed as the new Wynwood because Wynwood is now becoming an extension of the design district. And so, with God's help, I mean, I plan to, make a lot of noise, no pun intended, um, in Miami, and it's exciting, that both me and my stepmom are in a more like male dominated industry, but I'm not looking like someone's like, oh, you're looking to disrupt it, and I'm like, I'm not. It's not that high end audio was excluding women. It just happened to be that industry in itself, like the back end of like the recording industry and whatnot, was just more, I guess, geared towards men. But our message is that you don't have to be a super geeked out audiophile to experience good sound, and I welcome women, men, children, whomever, to really
Yeah.
experience
That makes a
music
lot of
and
sense,
good
Miss Lamb, and
sound.
everything. One of the things I was curious about, and you actually brought it up and everything, was kind of the nature of music and the nature of just that kind of sound and creativity just to our general well-being. I do agree with you that music and a lot of creative things are what are the unifying factors. We have a lot of non-unifying factors in that space. But I'd love to hear, as a filmmaker, Deborah's thoughts around that, and if she's been even looking at some of the sound even in her film industry and all in that space, because even with the film that you just did, I imagine there had to be some sound issues that you were looking at and trying to get on in that way. And I do know that here in Durham, North Carolina, we had for a while, even though it left and went back to Asheville, I believe, the Moog Festival, and we still have Art of Cool, which are very much music oriented festivals. But how important has music been to your own career and of the stuff that you've been doing, Miss Richard?
Right, right. Well, first of all, Esther, it's so nice to meet you. And I was just in Woodwood a couple weeks ago, shooting a documentary out there. So I'm sad that I didn't know you back then because I could have come over and seen the place. It sounds amazing.
Aw.
Congratulations.
Well, come
Um,
anytime. You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you very much. So yeah, like Esther was saying, sound transcends so many things and it becomes a spiritual experience. I think it exists somewhere in the same realm as a dog's love. There's just something about it that just doesn't seem this plain. And music to me has always been super important. I was actually a studio engineer in my teens, back in 1980. And so, yeah, so I was there at the beginning of the kind of digital desktop revolution from the late 70s and through the sequencing and sampling revolution of the 80s. And that was the precursor in the recording studio, the NLE editors, nonlinear editing that was brought about through technology. That was the precursor for nonlinear editing in film. So it was very easy for me to make that transition when the technology caught up and it was able to start editing film. I already had the basics from essentially editing music and sequencing situations. So music's always been, I'm a musician. I play the congas, I play guitar, and I play piano. So I've always, the sound and music has always been a massive part of my creative process. And sometimes when I'm writing, I like to imagine music. And actually, it was interesting on my latest movie, Move Me to Mountain, which is now available on Amazon Prime. Um, the lead actress, Kat Lilly, she actually broke down and made a playlist of a different song for every single scene in the movie. And so before performing a scene, she would listen to that song to get into that mind space for that specific scene. And I don't know what songs she picked, but you can see how above and beyond what you think music means to a filmmaker is part of the integral creation process, at so
Yeah,
many
no,
levels.
no doubt about that and everything. And like I was saying, definitely have other amazing folks that are here as part of the dinner party and all in that space. And definitely want to bring in some of them as well. So I'm going to bring in Victoria. She's been listening in the background and she may have some thoughts as well. And one of the things I was getting ready to be curious about for all of you ladies, and I do have a gentleman that I'll be bringing in very shortly as well, can be an all women's party and all in that space at the dinner party, even though for me it might be good and all in that way. But what is if you'll share a little bit about your knowledge and your thoughts? But one of the things I was curious about is how important is creativity to addressing issues? I just heard Mr. Lamb talk about some of the things that she's doing there in Little Haiti, and I know that your latest film is about homelessness, and you've got a book about credit despair. So it does seem like the using the arts as a means to talk about issues is a very important thing. But I'd love to hear all of your thoughts around that. But Victoria, if you'll introduce yourself and share a little bit about what you've got going on as well.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm Victoria McCooey. I'm a narcissist divorce coach. So I help people who are trapped in a marriage to a controlling, abusive, or otherwise narcissistic spouse who don't think they can leave because the repercussions seem just too unbearable. So I help them to reclaim their power and to get strong enough to create some boundaries and hopefully move out of that toxic relationship.
I appreciate that and everything, and definitely that even that conversations around bullying, it can be used in the arts as well. One of the shows that we do here on Pod TV is called "Where Is the Love," and actually, my friend Stephanie Hockenhall and her son Gene, who have both been in relationships where that was going on. Narcissism and other parts of the bullying aspect is the reason they created the show, because they wanted to bring these issues in, whether it was narcissism or whether it was rejection or whether it was a number of other things. So that is every Sunday at 6 o'clock on podtv.tv. So it is something that is a very important issue. And as I was alluding to earlier, even the whole mental health conversation has been something that we've been seeing a lot of, and social media, which we were talking about earlier, has played into that as well. But I just wondering your thoughts on that, Victoria, because it does seem that social media has played into some of these conversations.
Well, I talk about all the time how back when I was going through my divorce, it was the year 2000. And even, it was a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago. And no one knew the word. No one knew what a narcissist was. That's how far this whole concept has gone. It's now like we think everyone's a narcissist now. But back then, there was no social media. There was no Google. There was barely internet. And no one knew what it was. So when this was happening to me in my own marriage, I thought it was me because that's what I was being told, that I was the problem, but it just, nothing seemed real or right. So when finally I was able to be separated, and I had the first day off because I had 3 very young children, and I never had a moment to myself. But the first time after we were separated, when he had visitation time with the kids and I was alone, I went to the library, which is now what you do when you go on social media and you start looking for answers, right? I went to the library and I found the psychiatry section and I started reading the DSM manuals about, what all these disorders were. And I didn't even know they existed before that. And reading those pages on narcissism was jaw-dropping for me because it was like they were in my house watching. It was just textbook, everything that was going on. So yeah, social media plays a big part in this, because there I was totally isolated, thinking I was the only one who'd ever been through anything like this, that nobody else understood. And now it's everywhere. There are forums, there are Facebook groups, there are all kinds of coaching support that everyone, I think at this point, knows that it's a thing, it exists, and you can get help.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I'm going to bring in Brian, but I did want to hear getting back to the creative side. But there's so many issues and thoughts that I've been having, as y'all have been bringing up so many interesting topics and interesting thoughts in that space. But what is y'all's thoughts around creativity as a tool to bring awareness to these various issues, whether it's narcissism, whether it's the whole issue around homelessness, or whether it's around a number of other things? So how important do you think it is for us to use our art and our creativity to get these messages out?
Sure, I'll jump in. So for me, it's not really a choice as an artist. I feel that I'm an artist to the core. So I'm an antenna, and whatever is in front of me, I will internally process and spit out as art. So if I look out my window, out of my beautifully privileged apartment, and I look out the window and I see homeless people in the street, then that dichotomy is somehow going to get, internalized and brought out as art. And that's exactly what happened with my last movie. So as far as, me being a champion of causes, I wish I was that, heroic. I'm not. It's just I'm an antenna. So whatever's in front of me, I'm gonna, create art with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. Brian, if you'll introduce a little bit about yourself as well, and then I've got the last guest that I'll be bringing in, and we'll just continue the conversation for about 30 minutes to an hour or so along those lines. But always good to have amazing guests out at the dinner party and all in that space. So, Brian, if you'll share a little bit about your story and what you're all about.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Mark. Hello, ladies. Good to see you all. Brian Sachetta. I'm the author and owner of a brand and book series called Get Out of Your Head, which seeks to help folks overcome anxiety and depression. So, we talked about creative problems, coming up with solutions to problems in a creative fashion and whatnot. I think Deborah mentioned, like, as an artist, you almost can't avoid doing that sort of thing. I always have kind of been figuring out, do I find myself on the entrepreneur side of things? Am I on the artistic side of things? I don't know. All I know is that, I've come up across different problems in my own life, mental health being one of them, anxiety, depression, all those sorts of things. And when you deal with a big enough problem or a problem that you care enough about, eventually that artistic side or the creative side, like, is forced out of you, right? And you say, I want to solve this problem in some degree. I don't know what it's going to be. Maybe that's just for myself. Maybe that's for others. But then all the wheels start turning in your mind, right? And you say, okay, am I writing a blog post? Am I writing a book? Am I shooting a movie? Am I having some sort of group that I get together in my neighborhood? That's where that creativity comes out. And then from there, the fun thing about the creativity is you never really know where it will lead to, right? It's like, first you do a podcast episode and then you connect with somebody and it leads somewhere else and somewhere further from there. So it can definitely be fun and rewarding to get that creativity going.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You brought up something that I know has been brought up on a lot of the shows that we've done here on Pod TV and a lot of the online dinner parties. And I love to hear everybody's thoughts, and then we'll bring in, like I said, the last guest and everything. But one of the things that I've been observing and all in that line is how often we are our own worst enemies. That self-critic is a very real thing. We can oftentimes be our own worst enemies, and we can also sometimes listen to too many other people that are in our head. So I just wondered to all of you how you deal with that inner critic and also those outer critics that don't always have our best interests in heart, and sometimes they are even in our own families and all in that space. So I'd love to hear from everybody, and I definitely want Mary Ellen to introduce herself as well. But if we can start off the answers, and then if Mary Ellen will bring in some of her knowledge as well.
Well, I'll jump in if that's okay.
Please.
Yeah.
Hi.
So,
Hello, everybody.
Hey.
Hi.
Yeah, Victoria, jump in.
yeah. Okay. So I started my coaching business when I was 57 years old. So people thought I was crazy. I left a big corporate job and I bootstrapped this whole thing, and it's great. It's very successful now, but it wasn't at first. Like any business, it takes a while to get going. So not only did I have everybody else telling me I was crazy, including my husband, but the gremlins crept in every night, the 3 a.m. scaries, like, what the hell did I just do? And how is this ever going to happen? And then something good would happen. I would be on top of the world. It would be like, yes, of course, this is what I was meant to do. Of course, this is the right thing. But then a few days later, back to the gremlins creeping in, so I think it takes stamina. I think it's keeping your focus and knowing that it's a roller coaster ride, knowing there are going to be ups and downs. And every time you get to a down, not saying I'm off the ride, you have to ride it out. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
that definitely answers the question and everything. Ms. Lamb, I'm thinking that part of what you had is you had the advantage of a generational situation. Your dad had created this great invention and all in that space. But did you ever face those demons as well, where you were sometimes wondering about even tackling and taking over the business and all in that space? So I'm sure there were
I'll tell you, Mark, as Victoria was just talking about that, I'm like, I could so relate to it because I'm actually facing that right now where how shall I say this? My father, even though he built this like really world class brand, his reputation didn't really match like the infrastructure and the image. Like even though like people would think, oh yeah, lamb, you guys probably have like this big factory. No, it was my father turned his home. It was like the old, like, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates kind of story, except that he never evolved into a factory. And what I saw, just because I had a knack for just marketing and PR. Like since I'm little, it just kind of came intuitively to me. And I did fundraising for 10 years. Again, all these things, like I call it divine providence, how God, places. I'm sure everyone here could relate. As Victoria just said, like you have these like little wins and aha moments, and only you really understand that. Someone else can be like, okay, what does that actually mean? You're like, no, God is with me. I'm on the right track. I know this is good, you know? So the way that I saw for my father's business, like for me to find a good strategic partner, because I can't do all this. I can't come, continue. And Mary Ellen, who's on the call and she's part of our PR team, knows this. We have conversations. Even her partner Mark said, I don't know, you have somebody up there doing something and watching, but it just seems to work out for you. But it's scary, and I feel like you just have to. I feel like this. I get advice. I have a lot of good advisors, people who, you know, 40, 50 years in the business, whatever it is, 30 years, and I listen to everybody, but I follow here. And in order to follow here, I really have to be honest with why I'm doing this. And this is like the integrity part. This is what Deborah was saying, that like the dichotomy of looking outside that there's homeless people, right? And I think about this all the time. Why am I doing this? Am I doing this just so I'm gonna, sell expensive sound systems to very wealthy people? Okay, yeah, that's part of it. But what am I gonna do after? I want to heal the world, right? Because that's what that's what I feel is the legacy for my father. I want to bring unity and bring people together. And I believe you do that through sound and through music and for whatever reason God put me in space right now. But Mark, I get scared all the time, but then I remember the bigger picture and why I'm doing this. And there's an expression we have in Hebrew, it's translated as we make God's will our will, not the opposite. And when you do that, I feel that I'm connected to a power and a mission greater than and I get that like support. But yeah, I'm scared now without talk about bootstrapping. With that, I don't have a strategic partner, but I also felt like I had to bring the infrastructure to match the brand. Otherwise, a very savvy investor would come in, look at the situation, assess it, and say, yeah, but I have to take all the risk. I want 90% of the company, and I didn't want to be in that space. So I'm taking a lot of the risk now, believing in trusting my gut.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Deborah, what about you? Have you run across that? I'm sure that whether it's this film or other times, there have been times that you have been very much having that inner demon as well. So I just wondered, how do you address it and deal with it? And also, the other thing that was crossing my mind as y'all were talking is how much the arts don't necessarily get support in either the school system or sometimes from the government. Because I know we used to have a very successful film industry here in North Carolina. It's still relatively successful, but it's not what it used to be. Part of the reason it's not what it used to be is we lost the film credits. So other people got better film credits than in other parts of the country, like definitely in Canada, definitely in Atlanta, and a number of other places as well. I think Louisiana has some better film credits, and we're trying to figure out ways to get better in that space. So hopefully it'll be improved, so better, so we can get back to that number 3 or number 4 slot that we used to have way back when.
Well, first off, yeah. I often have a demon on one shoulder and another demon on the other one. But and then the angel shows up and they all fight it out. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. To be a film director, you've got to accept that you're choosing a career path that's like getting punched in the face again and again and again. Filmmaking breaks your heart again and again and again, and filmmaking is very much a part of compromise and collaboration. Things are never the way that you think they're going to turn out. It's always a long journey that you don't know really the destination. So there's a lot of pushing through self-doubt, and you got to have real thick skin in the entertainment industry for that reason. I don't know how actors do it, constantly getting rejected at auditions. I think I would crumble and cry on the couch for a week. But still, as a film director, I have to be, each film I do takes me a couple of years, and I have to buckle up, knowing that I got to put my big girl pants on, and knowing that it's literally like squaring up with a brick wall, running at it full speed, going through it, tumbling over, dusting yourself off, and then squaring up against the next one. That's literally the insanity of filmmaking. With regards for incentives and state tax incentives and stuff like that, America might as well be, a whole bunch of little countries altogether, because I mean, every state is completely different. And what's interesting is that in the 60s, I believe there was a government program where they gave money to Hollywood for people to make movies. Like literally, it was like grants. And the citizens of America rebelled against it and said, we don't want free money to make movies. And so the government stopped. And, and in Europe and stuff, all the different governments, even Canada has, film funds for the artistic, disbursement of funds for the arts that go to films. And in America, there's none of that, but it did have it once. And people, for some reason in America, people get very upset when you try to give them something.
Wow. And Jill, I'm sure that there's even times that you feel like you are, and I was talking to another guest on another show earlier today, and they were actually in that whole notion of going against processed foods and all in that space. And I had made the analogy of tilting at windmills. And I'm thinking that with as bad as we are with credit and as much as people are having credit so ingrained in their society, that even in the work that you're doing, that you sometimes feel that you're tilting at windmills as well, because it's so ingrained in our society. So I'm just wondering, how do you deal with that? And I'm sure that even is part of that inner critic as well, where you're going like, it's a good issue and a good cause, and I definitely need to be doing this great work, but maybe folks are not quite resonating with it the way that they should be.
Yeah, and I definitely have the inner critic. I have that. I also had, when my father was alive, always criticized me, saying, why would you give up a steady paycheck? Always against me. He's, but you have to realize that what other people say may not be right for you. And what I've found that works for me is I have a great buddy, a good friend, confidant that I can talk to and say, this is what I'm going through. What do you think? And they aren't necessarily my inner critic, but they'll give me ideas because they're looking at it from a different way, their perspective. So you kind of have to believe in your passion and push through to get your message out there.
That makes a lot of sense. I know that one of the other things that happens, and I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts around this, but I'll start with maybe Brian, is too often we get caught up in other people's dreams, because I know I've even been in that situation as well, and it definitely can even come to what Victoria was talking about, where they will have a very dominating or overbearing kind of personality, and they bring you into their vision. I remember one person that literally wanted several of us to fold our company into his company, and all in that space without any true advantages to the folks involved. So I just wondering, how have you dealt with that? Because there are some of those in all industries, sharks out there that will try to have you get involved in their dream, and it's not necessarily your personal dream at all in that space. I'm not saying that you can't be encouraging and even support friends of yours that are in different fields and different things, but you do have some folks that try to manipulate you into forgetting your own dreams and passions. So I was wondering your thoughts around that, and if anybody else has any thoughts, because I'm thinking Victoria's probably like, that sounds like some narcissist to me.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I had myself on mute for a second. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and I think, you know, in today's society, there's a lot of distractions out there, right? I think especially, I mean, it depends on the personality. Like for me, I remember being in my 20s and being like, oh, I got to make rent, and you know, because of that, I need to go get a job somewhere else. But at the same time, kind of had these thoughts lingering in the back of my mind. And there's some saying that goes around on Twitter and the internet, basically saying like, you know, get busy working on your own dream, otherwise somebody will hire you for theirs. And so, you know, kind of connecting the conversation that all the ladies have been having here and saying like, you know, if there is something that you want to do, first you have to identify it, right? But then you also have to have some purpose outside of yourself, some mission, some meaning. Otherwise, like you're going to get punched in the face, right? And it's going to be some matter of time before you say, look, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going back to somebody else's dream. I'm going back to a steady paycheck, whatever it may be. None of that is to cast judgment and like say, you know, somebody should decide one way or another. Everybody has their own things that they have to think about in life. And I mean, I work for, you know, a corporation. I do my book stuff on nights and weekends. But I think even if you do like a side hustle kind of thing, right? It's like if you start it and you say, I'm doing this because I want to make a little bit of extra money, or I want to become famous or something, right? It's just, I think everybody on this call, right? Victoria with the coaching, Esther with the audio stuff, Deborah with the movies, like everybody, right? Jill with the financial stuff. It's like, I think everybody could relate to the fact that there are just so the competitive landscape out there is fierce and immense. And there are so many things that are waiting to punch you in the face and take your lunch, that if you don't have that mission that says, look, I'm staying the course because I want to help people, I want to do something greater than myself, you'll go back, right? You'll say, I'm done with this. I'm going back to somebody else's dream. And that could be okay, but maybe that's not what you want. And just maintaining the perspective of what you do want is kind of the most important thing. That way you can look back and say, I did it the way that I intended to do it.
That makes a lot of sense. Hey, Esther, this is along with what Brian was just saying, because I've also seen people that are in the multi-level marketing space and all in that kind of lane, and even some other entrepreneurs that will sometimes see your entrepreneurial dream. And as far as I'm concerned, any entrepreneur is probably going to be winding working up about 80 hours of the day. Sometimes it feels like 100 hours of the day, but then they want you to be involved in their business. Because I can't tell you how many times I have turned down some multimedia or multi-level marketing plans, including one yesterday and everything. Because I'm going like, I'm sorry, I've got, to Brian's point, I've got a regular job, and I've got the job that I'm working on a regular entrepreneurship space and everything. There's no way I can do 3 jobs. If I had a family, that'd be next to impossible and everything. But fortunately, I'm in that single space and don't have any kids, even though I do have my nephew and my younger brother, and my mom and dad are still living even at my age of about to be 61 in July. But I'm going like, if there was actually some of these other balancing acts, I don't know how I would manage it. But you have folks that are constantly trying to throw other things on you. So I was wondering, is that something that you've had to deal with? And I was also curious about Deborah as well, where folks are trying to pull you into other businesses. Because I'm thinking that a audio company, because I do know a friend of mine that was having a audio company. I think he was in the Midwest somewhere, Mr. Latshaw. And I know he was spending tons of hours, and I don't even know how he did it and everything. So I'm thinking he's probably spending 150 hours on this whole project and everything. So if somebody's trying to get you to do something else, I don't know that you would have the time, but that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's amazing your parents and everyone should till 120 be alive. That's amazing. Yeah, you know, having 2 little kids, I have a 7-year-old. My friend stopped in, and that's why it's kind of quiet. She's keeping them. They should be sleeping, but our schedule's been off. But yeah, I have a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old. You know, I used to always work for other people because somehow in my head I was like, okay, I'm going to take over the family business. I didn't really know when this would happen. And then, you know, sometimes we're pushed, you know, it's like God gives you lemons. So I chose to make lemonade, right? Because I was like, okay, my father got sick. What am I going to do now? Funny enough that you say this, as I realized that I really needed to hone in all my focus on this, um, my husband, who I used to help, and it was like a good pre, running my father's business, like almost like an appetizer. I was helping him. He had retail locations, distribution, and whatever. That's just how my father taught me. Whatever you do it 100%, like as if it's your own. Doesn't matter what it is, right? So he got more busy and he needed more of my attention, and I had to make a strategic decision, like either we're going to like sell the brand name and sell the company and I can't put 100% into it, or I just have to start saying no and really start being very conscientious with my time, which I think all of us, I mean, I'm still working on that, right? How do I really, you know, when I'm with my kids, I need to be with my kids. Sometimes I'm multitasking, but I found a lot more value to really, like, even on this trip, I had to like kind of, put things on the back burner, even though I monitor, like, again, we just opened our new location. So I am on top of it. I check in with our engineer, with my stepmom, with our PR team, with our agency, whatever I need to do. But also my time here when I'm with my kids, I'm like, there's this, I was just saying to somebody, you can, in Russian, I speak Russian, so you can be at two parades at once. Like, like you can be with one. Really, the expression is funny. It's like you can be with one ass in two parades. That's like literally if you translate it. But it's true. So it's like sometimes you need to just focus and say and learn to say. I started to learn, and this was a while back, and I'd love to hear like who else relates to this. Sometimes you have to say no. You have to learn to say no and to be laser focused to get to where you need to be. Otherwise, you're just gonna get lost, in the
It is such a
trenches.
powerful word in all that sense, but I don't know that we use it enough or even understand the power of the word, and that is the simple words "no" and all in that space. But along those same lines, and what you just asked, and I want to ask everybody else that: how do all of you do that work-life balance, and how do you manage to say no? Because I do find that quite often. Many entrepreneurs, including many successful entrepreneurs, wind up being and I'm going to use a term that the lady that's studying narcissism will understand. We wind up people pleasers, and
We do, we do. Listen, it was a big transition for me too, because mom of three. Well, now I'm mom of five because I have two stepchildren, but it's hard to say no. And we're, excuse me, Brian, if this isn't true, but women tend to like try to do everything for everyone, maybe men too. It's really difficult to draw that line when you're trying to start a new business or become an entrepreneur or start a brand, whatever it is that, I talk about my business as my baby. And if I don't tend to my baby every single day, it will die. It's really that important that I be in the business every single day. And yes, it will lighten up as I hire more help and things progress to another level. But we're at the stage where I am right now, I can't forsake it for a day. And yeah, my children are grown, they're adults now, but when they come home, it's a whole different thing. It used to be mom, 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 even as adults, they never change. Mom, where's this? Mom, I need this. Where can you do this? And now they know I've made boundaries. It wasn't comfortable for them at first, but they'll knock on my office door. They won't just barge in. They'll say, when is a good time for you to help me with this, instead of I need this now, right? So you have to groom all the people around you to get on board with your priority.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And Brian, I don't know if you're going to have the same thoughts and all in that space, but I hate to admit it, and it actually comes down to the financial aspect. But if we're talking about the power of women and the roles that women play and may is going to be Mother's Day, and I definitely have a great love of my own mom, and actually talked to her earlier today. Try to talk to her 3 or 4 times a week, probably on a regular basis. But I would be lying to y'all and lying to the audience if I said that there weren't times, even at the age of almost 61 in July, that I don't reach out to mom and be like, the money's a little bit tight. Can I get that loan? And all in that space. And usually, well, mom will be like, "Yep, it's all right. Here's the money that I've got." If she's got it, if she doesn't, she will also call me on it as well. But she's not going to pull out and not give the support when she feels that I need the support, and all in that space. So, Brian, am I the only one that's among the older men that will reach out to mom even at the age? And I know you're younger than I am, but do you still reach out to your mom?
Absolutely. I'll be talking to her in a little bit. Yeah, I'm very lucky to have both my parents. They're great folks, have taught me a lot in life. And yeah, you think about somebody who you have such a trusting, loving bond with, you can tell pretty much anything to. That helps a lot, right? Whether you're starting a business, you're going off on a new path in life, we need confidants. We need people that we can rely in and kind of have that secure base, right? Sort of people think about like attachment theory and whatnot in psychology. It's like the more secure we sort of feel, the more we are able to then adventure out, right? Otherwise, it's like, I'm scared all the time. Like, how do I even make the next move?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What's your thoughts, Victoria? Because I know that a lot of times we are not even dealing with the mental aspects of our relationships, and that is something that I know that even your work deals with as well. So I think sometimes there are times that society tells us not to leave environments and leave situations. I think that that's part of what goes on in the divorce situation. I know that we have got a high divorce rate, but I have friends that are in the church space, and I know that certain churches, not saying all churches, will even discourage folks from getting divorced, even if it is in a bad situation and all in that lane. So I just wondering,
Listen,
how
yeah,
do you
I
decide?
deal with that all the time. These poor people who think that they can't leave because of religious reasons and also cultural reasons. There are a lot of cultures that they just, I have people come to me and say, I cannot do this to my family. It would be such a disgrace. So yeah, that's another hurdle. And, that out of my realm, I can't change generational stigmas. And it's just at some point things will change, but are they going to be the generation to change it? I don't know. It's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot for these people to stand up to their culture, their church. All these things are very, very strong.
No, I agree. Deborah, when you were doing the research, because one of the things that scares me about some of the research around homelessness is how much it is impacting our youth. And I actually just saw a beautiful commercial. It was actually on LinkedIn that I first saw it, and that was one around Dove and Dove's kind of campaign around eating disorders. And what he was talking about is how 3 in 5 of our youth are dealing with mental health issues and all in that space. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if you were born in any time between 2001 and now, the various things that you've gone through, because I just wrote that in my post and everything. So anybody that's under the age of 22 has been through 9/11, because that would have been 2001. They've been through these various school shootings. They've been through a pandemic. They've been through various wars, including the war that's going on now in Ukraine. So I'm going to think to myself, we wonder why our kids are having problems and why they're turning to social media and all in those lines. But I was just wondering your thoughts as one that is a filmmaker that addresses a lot of powerful issues like this.
I think with regards to homelessness and kids, and specifically, like teenagers, um, it's really hard to tell when they're homeless because they just throw a backpack on and they just blend in, right? So that's one of the strange things that I learned when we were searching, for the movie, that it's really hard to kind of know who is. And then the other wackadoodle thing is that really young kids, like, so kids over like 12, and so they throw in a backpack and you're like, oh, it's just a teenager doing his thing. But then the really young kids, sometimes they'll end up in shelters, and because shelters have such a low barrier for entry because they're mandated to get people off of the streets, that sometimes families show up with kids who look nothing like the families. and the intake officers have to look the other way because it's their priority to get people off the streets. So there's definitely, a massive issue with like homeless children, but it's very in the shadows. You know
Yep,
what
I
I
can
mean?
definitely see that and everything. And Jill, and one of the things I was curious about is, and actually Deborah kind of alluded to it, is I've also had some friends of mine that have intentionally, and they've done it sometimes even with their money and other sources, gone into what is considered off the grid, and that's kind of what the kids that she's talking about are. They are intentionally almost like going off the system. They don't want to pay any electric bills. They don't want to be necessarily living in a particular house or anything of that nature, and they are definitely trying to get themselves off of whatever financial systems minus whatever they need for day-to-day survival. Because I think it was like several years back that I heard some friends of mine talking about going off the grid in one fashion or another. So I was wondering if that played any part in some of the work that you've been doing in the credit space, because I'm thinking some of the people you're talking to are going like, I don't want to have my money out there and even be seen as much as it used to be.
Yes, somewhat, but I see more people saying credit is so scary. I don't want to do anything. I'll just live off cash.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I see that it can be scary, the finances, to face them or to learn about them. It's not something that's discussed in the household with the kids. It's
Yep.
always, kids put their hand out, and if parents can, they give them money, but they don't show them how. They see a swipe of a debit card or a credit card and don't necessarily equate that to cash. So it's kind of overwhelming. And when they're overwhelmed, they retreat back and want to stay away from everything.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know if everybody else's thoughts are on this, but another conversation that's been on this network and everything is how there are new systems, even in the financial lanes, which also throw people off about finances. Because we have David Walker, who is he worked as comptroller general for both Bush and Obama. And he was even talking about BRICS, which is this new thing coming out with the British, the Russian, and some other countries as possibly even replacing the dollar. And of course, we know there's all kinds of conversations around crypto and everything. And I don't know that people are having a full understanding of what they're getting into in the financial lanes. And I also don't know that there's been enough conversations in the education space, just in general, whether that's in college or in churches or even in our communities. But I'd love to hear you ladies and Brian's thoughts around that. If that's something we need to do a better job of, is teaching even in some of the newer forms of finances, whether that's the BRICS dollar or the BRICS coin that may be coming out, or whether that's the crypto space. But I think a lot of people just jump into it because it's the new toy in town.
I think on the topic of education, I think the thing that most needs to be taught in schools nowadays is flexibility and mental nimbleness, because things are changing so fast. You can't
Mhm.
train someone for a job that's probably gonna not be there, and by the time they, graduate. So I think it's a different approach to education and fostering curiosity and critical thinking and mental flexibility.
Yeah, definitely. I want to hear from Brian, but Mary Ellen, I know that you were here with Esther, but I know you're in that PR space, but some of the folks are wanting to hear your thoughts as well. And definitely, if you can just share some of your insights on this conversation we've been having. I know you weren't planned guests, but I love having a dinner party and having conversations from folks on a regular basis. And PR is a regular part of the conversation. So if you can just share a little bit about your own thoughts and what you've been listening to and learning in this lovely online dinner party.
Well, I was so touched by everyone talking about their parents, their moms, because I lost my parents at a very young age, and so many times I want to reach out to them and say, well, what should I do here? What should I do there? And when the doctor says, well, do you have a history of this in your family? And I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know. I have, I'm the guinea pig. I'm the one that'll be leading the way on this for future generations. But I agree so much with Deborah that I think that terms of education, we do need to have more of an emphasis on critical thinking, on developing new ideas for ourselves, and not following, leaders who may be taking us down a path that we don't really believe in, but we're following because that's what everybody else says we should do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can definitely see that kind of belief pattern. A lot of people do have that kind of thought, just kind of going blindly just because of whatever is going on in their life. To all of y'all, and we got about another 15 to 20 minutes. I've definitely got a key question that I ask everybody toward the end and everything. But one of the things I was curious about is, and I think Esther might have alluded to it earlier. I know Deborah did. How important is both faith as well as your connection to the ancestors and to those in the past, to all of y'all in your journeys? Because I know that even in my own life, I still resonate and think about my grandmother who passed away back in the 80s. I just dated myself and all in that space, but she was the founder of the Black Library in Raleigh, North Carolina, and definitely was the very much of a leading factor in my own media journey, and even some non-family members like Baba Chuck Davis, who is in the dance community, and Theo Freelon, who designed one of the, well, was the primary designer of the African American museum that's up in DC and passed away. I believe it was of Lou Gehrig's, are all part of my legacy community that I still feel are communicating with me, even though they might not be here physically. It might be through dreams or it might be through other things. But I was just wondering, how important is that faith journey and that connection to those that have passed on to you?
Sure, I'll jump in real quick.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Sorry.
No
So I've had a very conflicted, relationship with faith and religion. When I was a child, I went to a Christian school. I had a Catholic mother, an atheist father, and I grew up in a Muslim country. So I was like, all y'all are cool. And while I am a woman of science, I can't help but there's more to everything than we can see and touch. And I'm trying to grapple with my personal journey with that, and what does that mean? And I think whatever the great unknown is, it'll be something that we didn't think it would be. But I'm still trying to figure that out, and the jury is out. But I definitely have a spiritual connection to nature and just the natural biorhythms of the planet.
No, and I think I would love to hear Brian's thoughts, but I think that that's something that I picked up on. I've had it all the time because I think of myself as being almost like an animal empath and a lover of both natural animals and even pets, even though I don't currently have a pet at the moment and all in that space. But even going outside, I will observe and pay attention to what the birds are doing and the squirrels are doing and a number of other things. So I think we do have to pay attention to not just our human family, but our animal and nature family as well. But Brian, did you have some thoughts also?
Yeah, sorry, I'll probably get a little heavier for a minute, but I talk about faith in my second book, which is called Get Out of Your Head, Volume 2, Navigating the Abyss of Depression. And I think that, we're seeing in a lot of places, like, and I'm not like looking down upon anybody that thinks this way or anything, but there's definitely a trend towards secularism and atheism, in the US and just across the world in general. I kind of look at, my grandparents' generation, and I think to myself, like, if they could see some of the trends now and the statistics, I think they'd be, I don't know, maybe a little ashamed or something, but the stats are what they are. I guess where I'm going with this is the fact that as we see a trend toward secularism, a trend toward atheism, I think we're also seeing a little bit of a trend toward nihilism, right? Folks saying there is no meaning to life. What is the point of life? All of that, right? And that has led to, I would say directly, but some people would say indirectly, a lot of cases of depression across, the U.S. and the world. If you get up every day and you say to yourself, life is meaningless, life is pointless, why even go forward? You don't have that motivating factor, right? So it's like, it's very easy to slip into depression, into mental health crises when, that is sort of your belief system. Now, obviously, like, everybody believes what they believe. I'm not here to convince anybody to believe a certain thing. I guess I'm just saying, the sort of thought process is if you step back and ask yourself, like, what do my beliefs help me do? If they don't help you stay grounded and secure during times of crises, then like maybe you want to explore that a little bit and be like, maybe I need to have faith in something. I also talked about more on, that's sort of the macro level. I also talk about in that book, in my second book, the micro level of like, even if you don't have faith in a higher power, you don't have faith in God or something like that, you need to have faith in something. You need to have faith in the fact that things will work out in your favor, right? So it's like when we are going through difficulties, when we are going through mental health crises, specifically depression, it's like if we don't have faith, like in the loosest sense of the word, then we say to ourselves, like, this depression, this battle that I'm dealing with is never going to end. When that's not entirely true, right? Deborah talked about being able to appreciate or, believe in things that we can't see, we can't feel, we can't touch. And it's like, I know this is a sort of a warping of the word faith, but it's like, so many people, like we love science so much. And it's like, we look to experiments to figure out like information about the world and all that. But it's like, you could go into a laboratory, have all these electrodes hooked up to your brain and stuff like that. But those electrodes and all that information would probably not be able to tell you when the depressive episode that you're going through is going to end, right? In order to give yourself that answer, at least have some hope and some good feelings about it, you have to have faith that it will end. So to be able to say to yourself, look, I don't know if this is going to end tomorrow, if it's going to end next week, whatever it may be, but I believe that it will. I believe that I will get better. And, through that belief, you then start taking action in the world. If not, you kind of, on the macro and the micro level, you start slipping back into that sort of learned helplessness state, even a little bit of that nihilistic state. And I don't think that's good for anybody. So I guess I'll get off my soapbox, but that's kind of what I had to say.
No, I appreciate everything. Esther, you're actually very much involved in the religious space. I know you mentioned being of the Hebrew faith and everything. So how important has that faith journey been, even in your own business career and all in that kind of space?
Okay, well, thanks for including me in this. So, the way that we grew up, well, we meaning when I was in the former Soviet Union, right? I even though I was a child, but I lived during that, no God in a way, right? Like era. Yet my mom, my father, even though we weren't really like outwardly observant, I don't even think I understood that we were Jewish until someone like said nastiness to me, and my father explained to me, and I came home crying and said this is what they said. And growing up in the States, even though I went to yeshiva, which is like Jewish.
I think she got lost there and everything.
Sorry, I apologize for that. For the first 2 years that we immigrated, I grew up pretty.
Oh no.
Having some issues there and everything while she's getting that together. Jill, did you have any?
I don't want to say I grew up like, God forbid, not without faith, without God, but I wasn't, as you could say, observant and educated, right? And I would say in my mid-20s, I started searching. I was searching always. I always felt that there's a higher power. To Brian's point, some people don't, but they need something to believe in. I came to Israel to learn, and when I started wanting to get connected to God, like I put the olive branch out there, I felt He started putting me on this path. Even like when I did fundraising for 10 years, what were the chances? Like I thought I'm gonna have this big PR career. I had everything mapped out, and I got connected to this organization, and then the rabbi connected me to another rabbi who was a world-class fundraiser. And then I worked for this like the largest not-for-profit, the JA Federation. And then I spent time in Israel just to it was a lot of information overload, right? So here I am, and I have this like heritage, and everyone said thousands of years, and and then I realized, wow, just even within the Jewish faith, it's such a spectrum, right? You have like, I think even some Jewish people I realized don't, and I was part of that, don't even realize who are these different groups of people and all these subsets. So for me, it was I always had a conversation with God. My mom taught me that you go to sleep, you think, and then I realized when I started like learning about religion, well, yeah, that's called the Shema. We close our eyes and we acknowledge that God is one in the world and there's only one. And again, for me, it became people are like, "Oh my gosh, it's so hard." Like I'm Sabbath observant. Like I'm off the grid on the Sabbath. Mariella knows the holidays, the festivals. I disconnect completely. Like I don't check email. I don't drive. I don't, and I've been living that. I'm 42, almost 43 now. I started doing that like really, really like 19. We started exploring, but like at 26. And people are like, that must be so confining and like so restrictive. And I'm like, no, it's the opposite. I don't know how I live the other way. Not to, I feel like the whole world needs that. We need a day, and I don't care what day. For me, it's a Saturday, right? Friday night to Saturday night. I feel like we need a day to pause and kind of reconnect to ourselves because we have information overload today. It's just what it is. And I feel grateful. We started out with this, right? Like someone said, like, I just feel immense gratitude that I'm able to see this, I feel like we're all living, if you really pay attention, doesn't matter which faith, whether it's Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, everybody talks about the end of days and the redemptive side. It cannot be, for me, from where I'm sitting, especially being in the Holy Land, it cannot be more clear that we are literally living through this right now. And we have really look at technology. Look at the fact that I'm in Israel. I don't know, you're in California, someone else, like we're all you're able to host a dinner party through technology. We all see each other, like it's a fantastic time to be alive, but it's also the most challenging, right? Because um, I heard something from a friend who's also like a therapist and a coach, and she said, there's always equilibrium. I don't know if Victoria will agree with this, but for as much good there is, right? There's also bad. Like there's no like it's not like, oh, it's not fair. There's always equilibrium, right? It's just a matter of choice for us, like which side, and where we want to, get our energy from, So for
Yeah.
me, it's more of a lifestyle. It's not that I'm like indoctrinated and I don't have to do anything. I could go out tomorrow and do whatever I want to do, and then say, forget all this. But it's like my life source. It gives
No,
me,
no.
yeah, meaning and purpose.
Yeah, definitely. What are your thoughts, Victoria, and everything along those lines?
Well, my mantra is that happiness is a choice. And this is what I preach to my clients, to my children, to everyone. It's right there for everyone. And you just, I say just, it's not just, but it's a big step. But you can choose to be happy. And it's focusing on the things that make you happy and not focusing on the things that don't. It changed my life. I know instead of, I remember somebody saying, "Oh, I can't believe that person's so upset." Yeah, I used to commute into New York City every day for my job. And so people are running for trains. Everybody's angry. Everybody's anxious. Everybody's stressed. It's just like this terrible way of life. And this man just missed the train. The doors are closing and he's pounding on the train. He's like so upset. There's another train coming, right? But he's so upset, so upset. And this person next to me said, I don't understand. Like, why would that person be so upset? Because that's the way it was supposed to be. He wasn't supposed to be on that train. He was supposed to be on the next train because something's going to happen that had to happen because he's on the next train, right? And it's like when you let go of holding on so tight to the way you think things are supposed to be and you let them be and you find joy and happiness in getting excited about what might be, it changes everything. I just took my stepdaughters to Paris. We were in Paris for a week. It was like the trip of a lifetime. And we missed the bus. We were going on a whole day tour to Giverny and Versailles, and this whole thing. It was the highlight of our trip. And we got up way early enough, but the Uber kept canceling. We were 3 Ubers in a row canceled on us, and we missed our bus. They put us on the next one the next day, but I was so disappointed. And then I caught myself. I was like, I can't wait to see what wonderful thing is in store for us today in Paris, that we had to miss our bus so we could be here and experience it. And sure enough, it was like the most fabulous day. But so that's what I mean by, if you choose to find the happiness in whatever it is, even if it isn't what you planned, your whole life changes.
It's interesting you mentioned that and everything, because I had the pleasure of introducing or interviewing a couple of days ago the amazing Kreskin, who is the
I remember
comedian that was with Carson and everything.
Yeah.
So we did that on a interview on Monday, this past Monday, and he literally told a story just what you said. He was on a trip. He was going on a trip, and he was missing the plane that he was supposed to catch, and it turns out that was a plane that crashed.
Yes,
so
of course. Yeah. You and I are the only 2 here old enough to know who the amazing Kreskin
Oh, I am too.
Deborah might know as well. So there's definitely some conversations that might know who the amazing Kreskin is in that space. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you all have as well. And I'm going to wind down, but I want everybody, as we get ready to wrap up in the next 5 or 6 minutes or so, because speaking of running, I got to run to catch a bus to get to my next job in all that space, which is why I usually say that the show lasts between 4 and 5:30 and all in that kind of space and all in that way. But one of the things I try to get everybody to do is share where they can be found on social media. Some of y'all have done that during the course of the conversation. I know Brian did. And this is one of the things I love to do, and we've been doing it during the course of this show, is messages of positivity and hope, because we are heard in roughly 200 countries around the world and all in that space here in Pod TV. So if you can share a message of positivity and hope to the global community, I would love to hear that. So I guess I'll start with to my left. So I'll start with Jill, and Jill was the first one, then go to Deborah and come around and all in that space.
Okay. Well, my website is jillrussofoster.com, and that's what it is on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, the whole bit. And I guess I agree with Victoria. I try and look for what I'm grateful for out there and try and look at the joy in life, you know. And there is definitely information overload, but if I keep looking for the joy or the light of the situation, I think, you know, on the positive side, I think things work out.
Yeah, appreciate that and everything. Deborah, glad to have you back on again, and definitely hope to have you back on again in the not too distant future. Glad that we were able to learn about this amazing movie you've got. But if you can tell folks how they can reach you, and also share any message of positivity and hope that you want to share with our audience as well.
Sure. Well, Move Me to Mountain is now out on Amazon Prime and I think Google Play as well. And I think you can rent it or buy it on YouTube even now. As for me, you can just Google Deborah Richards, and I'm all over the net. So, yeah, just Google me. And if you want to reach out, I'm very active on Instagram. I loved what you were saying, Victoria, and absolutely agree with all of that. You have to choose the light. I mean, like, what's the alternative? If you subscribe to nihilism, like, what a miserable way to be, right? So, my sister always tells me when I'm down in the dumps, be chipper. And I'm like, oh, okay. It sounds silly, but it's happiness is a choice, and I absolutely agree with that. And I think the cornerstone to happiness is faith, love, and hope. Okay, and if you break that down, faith is just having something to believe in, right? Whatever you want to believe in. Love, have something you're passionate about, and hope, have something that you're looking forward to. And if you can nail those 3 things, I think that you're in pretty good shape to be happy.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Ms. Lamb, any thoughts that you've got and things you want to share in a short message of positivity and hope, and also how they can reach you and get in touch with you and get even more information about this tremendous sound company that you are part of?
Sure. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think all of us really vibed with what Victoria said, because it's very true. And I guess what I would say is, in Hebrew, there's an expression. It's called gamza letova, like this too is for the best. And it's something that it seems very easy, right? As Victoria said, like, saying, well, it's just that's the hardest choice though to make, is to see the positive, not to get stressed out, not to blame, and not to, I think, we talk about, building the temple, whatever that looks like, right, in Israel. But really, the sages talk about, well, you can't like build a temple if you don't build an inner temple. And to build an inner temple, like we have to look inside and realize that, we have a choice to, are we going to spread chaos? I teach this to my children all the time, like, because everything is like an effect, right? I might be very validated, or the guy who's, banging on the train, maybe he had a big meeting, right? But it happened. So like, are we going to be in our narrative and spread our stress? Or are we gonna like integrate and say and breathe through it, whatever the technique is, right? That's the technique. But really, but be conscientious enough. I feel like that's the fight today, like, of evil versus good, is they're trying to take the conscientiousness out of the world. And that's what kind of Brian was talking about, like being like this nihilism, because when you're conscientious and you're more self-aware and you realize that we're all interconnected, we came from the same source. It's all one love, one God, irrespective of how you get there, through which vehicle, so that's my message to this, work on ourselves, build our inner temple, and, really love each other. That's the message. Really love your neighbor as you love yourself. Do to others as you want done for yourself. And we can be found on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, under Lamb Industries. I think it's, and on Twitter, it's LAMM _industries, INDUSTRIES. Or if you go to www.lambindustries.com, we launched a new website. I hope you guys check it out and like it. It's more geared towards like lifestyle and people wanting to be interested in something that's not just like audio geeked out, electronics. So I feel very privileged to have been on this with you ladies, and obviously Brian and Mark. So thank you so much. This was
No
really
problem.
special.
Appreciate it. Victoria, anything
Yeah.
you want to share? And everything I'll
you-
get to Brian as well.
Sure. You can find me at victoriamcooey.com and Victoria McCooey on Instagram. I have a very large TikTok following, if you can believe it. So that's just Victoria McCooey as well. And what was Victoria McCooey Coaching on Facebook. So
And a
yeah,
message
I
of
think
positivity.
yeah, the message that I just got from Esther is that we're all made of the same stuff. So lighten up.
Yeah. Brian, turn it over to you, and then I'll get one of these commercials to get us on out of here. But I do hope that I get all of you back on future episodes as well, because I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I hope you all have enjoyed it also.
Yeah, sounds good. I know you got to roll, Mark, so I'll be as brief as I can. Best place to find me and my works is getoutofyourhead.com. All one word, no dashes, no spaces in that. Mostly only active on Instagram with the books. The handle is Get Out of Your Head. Would like to be on TikTok. Unfortunately, don't have the following that Victoria does, but one day. And then, the message of positivity, right? It's looking at the last few years with COVID and the war in Ukraine. It's a really uncertain time. I think a lot of folks on the panel have pointed to that through this discussion. And it's like, these are difficult times. And, if you look at the stats, 1 in 5 people yearly are dealing with some sort of mental health crisis or mental health disorder. But I think, and that's obviously daunting, right? It stinks to go through those things, and those ordeals are very painful. But at the same time, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of good people out there. And I think that, you look at the literature and we see that these diseases can get better, and they often do. So to folks that are struggling with something right now, just know that it might not get better tomorrow, but it will in time. And, hold on to the belief that it will, because I think that'll happen for you. So.
I appreciate it. Y'all all amazing. Like I said, we're getting ready to get out here with a veterans message and maybe one other one. And then I'm getting ready to make that sprint over to my cultural arts center and all in that way. But I look forward to seeing all of y'all back on in the very near future.
Thank you for having me.
No problem.
Thank you.
How you holding up? Nothing wrong with getting help.
If I promise to look into it, will you drop it and help me build this fence?
Now you need my help.
If you or a veteran you know needs support, don't wait. Reach out. Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Well, let's do this one instead. Hold on. Yeah, we got one more I got to get, so let's get this one out of the way. Yeah, we'll do that one.
It's time for Bible or Babble.
Greetings to all you beautiful people. Bible or Babble, in association with Rejoice America Radio and Positive TV, presents the Bible or Babble at Sea Concert Cruise to Coco Cay and Nassau, Bahamas on the glorious Royal Caribbean, Independence of the Sea. There will be fun, praise, and a live taping of the Bible or Babble game show with a $1,000 grand prize going to the winning ministry. Join us along with ministry leaders and artists from all around the globe as they minister on board. Also featuring music from international recording artist Wayne Stoddard. Join us April 10th through the 14th, 2023 for a life-changing experience. Register today by calling 919-367-6237. That's 919-367-6237. Or email us at info@bibleorbabble.com. Come and sail with us for the 2023 Bible or Babble at the Sea Cruise. We hope to see you there.
Takes me on